pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So I will throw to Sarah to introduce our guest speaker for today.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Our guest speaker for today is Alister Robertson. Thank you so much, Alister, for stepping in at such short notice when someone else pulled out. Alister was diagnosed in 2014 with young onset Alzheimer's at the age of 60, a similar age to his father when he was diagnosed with the same condition. Alister gained a Bachelor of Agricultural Commerce, and his work history has been in the banking and finance industry, working predominantly in the rural sector. Alister gained governance experience during his time on the board of the New Zealand Primary Industry Management and was awarded a life member in 2007. Alister has been a board member of the Alzheimer's New Zealand since 2018 and a member of the Alzheimer's New Zealand Advisory Group since 2016. Alister joined Dementia Alliance International in 2016 and has been a board member since 2017 and elected chair in January 2021. Thank you very much for coming along. I hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Just to give you a little bit more, I suppose, information about me. So I live in a small city called Napier on the east coast of the North Island in New Zealand, one of the fruit bowls of New Zealand. And I'm fortunate that I have two adult sons who also live in Napier, and between them they provide me with three granddaughters. And I live now with my sister-in-law, who's my care partner. She lost her husband many years ago, and I lost my wife 12 months ago. So it works out well. We both provide support for each other. So because of the short notice, a lot of this is on the wing a wee bit. But I was asked sort of to provide a perspective of someone with dementia as far as my role on the various boards and sort of some of the benefits and some of the challenges. So a little bit, probably if I give you a little bit of background about both Alzheimer's New Zealand and Dementia Alliance International. So with Alzheimer's New Zealand, it's a non-profit organisation, and it represents people living with dementia at a national level by raising awareness of dementia, providing information and resources, advocating for high quality services, and promoting research about prevention, treatment, cure and care. And it supports local Alzheimer's New Zealand organisations throughout New Zealand, each of which is a member of Alzheimer's New Zealand, so they're a legal entity in their own right. So our local Alzheimer's organisations provide support, education, information and related services directly to members of their communities who are affected by dementia. So these services may include information and education to assist with understanding and living with a dementia diagnosis, support for family, friends and whānau, that's family, coping with the demands of caring, and support groups of day programs for people affected by dementia. So I suppose one of the important things with the organisations is that there is no government funding. So the Alzheimer's New Zealand member organisations are each in their own regions, and they get some funding from their regional health boards. But this only provides probably 20%, maybe up to 25% of the actual costs of operation. So the balance they have to raise, either apply for grant funding or just general fundraising activities. And it's the same with Alzheimer's New Zealand. it also gets no funding direct from government, and so it also has to rely on grant funding. And just a little bit about Dementia Alliance International. So it seeks to represent, support and educate others living with the disease and the wider dementia community. So we're an organisation that strives to provide a unified voice of strength, advocacy and support for our rights, individual autonomy and improved quality of life. Our members are people diagnosed with dementia, providing a unified global voice and providing empowerment, advocacy, education, and peer-to-peer support. So Dementia Alliance International was established in January 2014, primarily to promote education and awareness about dementia in order to eradicate stigma and discrimination and to improve the quality of lives of people with dementia. So it's, if you look back, I mean, that was since 2014. So one of the objectives was to, as far as reduce stigma, and I know, and I would imagine a lot of you will know of Kate Swaffer, and she just wonders a wee bit how effective we've been, because they said, you know, there is still a stigma with dementia, and it probably is no different now than what it was back in 2014. So I suppose, as far as just backstepping to Alzheimer's New Zealand, one of their objectives was that, as far as with their board, is that they would, they had always tried to have someone with dementia on their board, and that was to ensure that they had the voice of someone with dementia there. So, and it's not just solely that you're there as just as the voice. You know, I'm still there as board member, so you know my role is there still in the governance role, and secondly, then to also provide the voice of someone with dementia. And I suppose, you know, at that with that organisation, one of the benefit, well, a big benefit for me is that I actually have input directly into the policies or anything that they're doing. So if they're raising awareness or whatever it is, really it's a check by Alzheimer's New Zealand to see what they're wanting to do aligns with their beliefs, and also it's going to meet the requirements of those people with dementia. And I suppose through that, my role on the board, it's also involved me in lots of other organisations as well. So Alzheimer's New Zealand was also involved in initially putting together a dementia action plan. And I think Australia supposedly does have an action plan for dementia. And New Zealand hasn't, and so rather than waiting for the government to actually provide a dementia plan, if you like, the dementia sector decided that they would initiate a plan and present it to government. So I was involved in that initial working party that actually helped develop the Dementia Action Plan, which was submitted to government, and they have acknowledged the plan, and also they've acknowledged that it's probably the first time that a group such as those with dementia have actually submitted a plan to government that's really sort of has done the work for them. So really what we're asking is that, well, here's the plan. All you need to do is provide the funding to enable it to be implemented. So we're at the very early stages of that, and one of the requirements, or one of the suggestions in the action plan, was that there would be a leadership group formed that would involve people from the dementia sector involved in that, along with what we call the Ministry of Health, who would be the ones who would actually implement that plan. And so that leadership group was formed just prior to Christmas. And so people from within the sector actually had to apply to be on that board, or on that, they call it an advisory and leadership and advisory group. And I was fortunate to be accepted onto that that group. So there's 6-7 of us from the dementia sector, and that includes 2 care partners, but the other people are involved either directly with like Alzheimer's New Zealand organisation, or clinicians. Just trying to think who else. Yes, especially providing services to dementia. And then also on that leadership group, that are representatives from the Health New Zealand, which is called now. So we're at the very early stages of really trying to get parts of the input of the Dementia Action Plan. So we don't expect, or never have expected, that the government would implement everything from day one. So we've sort of tried to set out what the priorities are. And so at this stage, they've agreed to look at some of those priority areas, and have provided limited funding to trial some of these activities. So one was, for example, providing diagnostic support, providing services and support to people diagnosed within the first 12 months of diagnosis. And then one is also around navigation. So, and we've sort of said, well, navigation and diagnosis, especially in that first 12 months, go hand in hand. And the other area that they're providing some funding for is respite care. And I would imagine that it's no different in Australia as far as trying to find somewhere for respite is very difficult. And yeah, to provide it sort of on a short-term basis is near impossible to find. And I suppose I'm fortunate in that, being involved with Alzheimer's New Zealand on the board, is that yeah, they recognise the challenges and what have you that people do have with dementia. So I suppose my role on the board is, like I say, is one of governance initially, but also to provide the perspective of someone with dementia. And you know, that in itself provides lots of challenges for me. There's numerous board papers. We have a board meeting on a monthly basis, and there's numerous board papers that I get a week beforehand. And I've got to be a wee bit careful that I don't go suddenly reading all the board papers the first day, like 6 days before the board meeting. Otherwise, I sort of find at least a day or two before the board meeting, I've got to go and read the papers again, unless I've made sort of quite good notes, which is generally not unlikely. So yeah, it's a matter of being familiar with those papers before the board meeting. And sometimes the other challenge is that when we are in discussion about some topics, and the chair will go around the board members asking for their views or whether they support a particular view or whatever. And so generally I've said to the chairs, can they please not ask me first the question, and preferably at the end, just mainly because then it gives me time to process what the question is. And also I sort of find it is beneficial listening to the other board members beforehand while I'm sort of still trying to gather my own thoughts and what have you. So, and they acknowledge that, and yeah, there are times when they'll stop and even ask if I need a break or if I'm if there's anything that I don't fully understand, whatever. So I suppose moving on to Dementia Alliance International, I was fortunate that when I joined the board of DAI that I sort of brought that board experience with me. And probably the first thing I sort of probably noticed with the board of Dementia Alliance International was that the board was all made up of members, which was people with dementia. And it probably wasn't operating as a board as such and more as a committee, because what I found was that the members of that board a majority of them were involved in assisting with the day-to-day running of DAI. And so there really wasn't too much around governance. And so when just prior to me being chair, when I was vice chair and Kate was chair, then I sort of looked at maybe we need to be looking at moving more towards where the board was more looking at governance and less so at the operational side of things. And we did start to move towards that, but unfortunately what we found was that a lot of members had great ideas and offered assistance and promised everything, but when it came to the crunch, they weren't able to perform what they thought they could. And I suppose that's just one of the aspects of dementia, and that our capacity is impacted, and we all still think yes, we can do all these things that we've done in the past, but it does take its toll. And I suppose in the last 12 months with Dementia Alliance International, it sort of came to the point where if members weren't going to step up and help with the running of the organisation, then maybe we need to look at winding up Dementia Alliance International. And so at our AGM, we sort of said to our members, if we don't get support from them to continue to help run it, then the only option is to wind up Dementia Alliance International. We also provide some other options that we looked at or had considered. And one was maybe look at joining another type of organisation that provided sort of similar services to what Dementia Alliance International was providing. And probably the main one that was the peer-to-peer support groups that we provide. So on a weekly basis, members are able to join a particular group, support group, and we meet via Zoom, and it's generally about for an hour once a week, and there's no commitment to join every week or whatever. And there were other services that we provided, but over that sort of last 12 months, we pulled them back just mainly because we didn't have the resources to continue to provide them. The third option that we provided to our members was that we look at bringing on some people who don't have dementia onto our board, really to help strengthen the governance type role. and also to look at really employing people who don't have dementia to assist in the running of the day-to-day activities of the organisation. So our members said they didn't want us to wind up Dementia Alliance International, and we're quite in favour of having people on the board who did not have dementia, provided that our members, those with dementia, outnumbered those without dementia on the board, and that the board would be chaired by a member of the organisation. So we've been fortunate to have three very good people on the board now without dementia. So we have Jacqueline Wong from Brunei, and she has had involvement with ADI, Alzheimer's Disease International, and yeah, she also has a lot of involvement in Southeast Asia in the dementia sector. We have Patricia Bowen, who was a lawyer, but she's been involved in the dementia sector and providing care. I think she was involved on the board that was involved with residential care for people with dementia. So she has actually pulled back from a lot of those activities in this sort of semi-retirement, and saw an opportunity to join the board of DAI. And so with her sort of legal background is a great attribute to the board. The third member is Gary, and I should have written their surnames down. Apologies, Gary, if you ever watched this. So Gary's involved in solely in dementia, I think. So he's certainly a strong advocate for people with dementia, and probably you may know of him more with just trying to think that as far as providing care, and I'm just trying to think of the name of it. Anyway, it'll come to me later, hopefully. And so the other four members are all members of Dementia Alliance International. And so the reason, I suppose, many reasons for why we've brought people on without dementia was really to provide a wee bit more substance, I suppose, to the organisation. So, going forward, we are looking, because we need further funding. So when we're looking to apply for grant funding, which probably is going to be limited to America, because that's where our organisation is registered. So applying for grant funding, I think, sort of will help sort of strengthen our application, because we can sort of demonstrate that it's not just people with dementia who are running the organisation, because I think in the past that's possibly put some funders off. And also, as far as our finances go, again, previously we've run all that ourselves. So now, for example, Trish is our treasurer, and she has a strong background in finance as well. And we've also employed an accountant, not only to do our books, which we've always done in the past, had an accountant do that, but the accountant is also providing, if you like, our month-to-month bookkeeping. So again, it sort of provides a wee bit more guarantee, I suppose, from those grant funders that we have got someone responsible helping manage our finances. And we've been fortunate to employ the services of Ellen, and I can't think of her surname, but she was, sorry, she was the CEO of, can you help me, Sarah? I think you know who Ellen, no? Down syndrome. She was CEO of Down syndrome, and she has just recently resigned from that. She was there in the part, well, I think she was there in a 3 or 4 day per week role as CEO, but you know, she's done a great job in building that organisation, and now it's sort of got to the point where they need a full-time CEO, but she didn't actually have the time to provide that because she's got a young family herself. So we've been fortunate to get her services, and so she's contracting 10 hours a week to us to provide strategic direction, if you like. So she will help us with the development of our new strategic plan going forward for the next 3 to 5 years. And we're in the process at the moment hiring an admin type person who will hopefully provide about 20 hours per week in an admin type role, so help look after our membership and sort of provide a lot of the support for the day-to-day activities. So that's a little bit about both organisations and my roles as a board member with both of them.
Thank you, Alister. As usual, I have a couple of questions that are in my head. People probably or may not know that I volunteered for the board for Dementia Alliance International for quite a while. I haven't been there for a while now, and so interested to hear about the changes, and so glad that it's continuing on. Alister, I know that the founders of DAI were adamant that it would be for people with dementia by people with dementia, and that the board had been, for want of a better word, burnt just once or twice with people who wanted to come in and use perhaps the mailing list or the clientele for their own purposes. Bringing in people who don't have dementia, have you noticed a difference on the board? Has it made a positive impact, do you think? Or has it watered down the intent of those people, those founders who had dementia?
I suppose that was one of our concerns, was that their members would sort of consider that it's getting watered down. But I mean, at the AGM, they were certainly very much in favour of having people on the board, and recognised that there was a need to have someone, you know, some people there on the board. And yeah, I don't think it's watering it down, because I mean, we still need to have at least majority of members on the board, and it is chaired by a member of Dementia Alliance International. So we don't really see that there is any watering down at all.
That's good. Very good to hear. And I did have one other question, which might be a little touchy, I suppose. Is there a process or have the board thought about what they will do as people with dementia deteriorate beyond their ability to contribute to the board in a meaningful way? Is there do people like leave when they feel they're ready, or is there a way that the board deals with that?
Yeah, I suppose when I came on to the board, and more so when I was sort of vice chair and moving into the chair role, we did have board members who'd been there for some time, and they, if you like, some of the comments were, well, they actually enjoyed being on the board, just solely for the fact that they were a board member. So they didn't really contribute anything to the governance or to the running of DAI. And as chair, prior to one of their AGMs, I had a one-on-one session with each of the board members and just really sort of asked them where they saw their role and how they could contribute. And and sort of raised going forward what we actually needed from board members. So I found with most of them, I sort of agreed that, yes, it was because I'd been there for some time, that maybe it was time for them to step down and have some fresh blood, if you like, on the board. And there was some that sort of recognised that, they weren't sort of able to provide the sort of feedback or input into the board as they had previously done. So, it actually wasn't a difficult discussion to actually have with them. It was just a matter of actually having the discussion with them, and I think going forward, we do have that in their bylaws that if we deem to sort of think that someone isn't able or don't have the capacity to sort of continue to contribute, that we may ask them if they'd like to step down. So far, it really hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, well, that's very good to hear, because I could imagine it could there could be some touchy conversations if it did. Did anyone else have any questions for Alister while we have him here about either the board at Alzheimer's New Zealand or his role at Dementia Alliance International?
I've got a question. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Thanks, Alister. I'm really curious about how the Dementia Alliance International support groups run. I mean, do you have like small groups, and does someone lead the discussion, or is it just general chit chat? Can you tell us a little bit about how they run?
Yeah, so we try and limit the number of members within the support group to about 12. What we've found is that we've probably had at least 15 members in those support groups, because we know that not everyone will turn up each week. But we sort of find that there are times when we get good support, and in future we get people there like every week wanting to participate. So yeah, we do try and manage the numbers so we don't sort of get more than 12 within the group. And the groups are actually run by our own members. So normally we try and have 2 people hosting that support group, and they will be there regularly each week. And even though we call it peer-to-peer support groups, there's no actual formal structure to it. I mean, there are some rules around what we don't want them to do, and so we sort of try to avoid religion and politics. The American groups had great difficulty trying to stay away from politics when Mr. Trump was president, and if anything, I suppose for new members that come on, join the group, I mean, we recognise that it's a bit daunting that first couple of times when they come on, because they don't know anyone there. So it is a bit of time is spent with those participating is introducing themselves, when they were diagnosed, and just a little bit about themselves. And then it's really, in general, we'll sort of find with new members, then they'll probably sit back and just sort of listen. And it'll be if you like, just normal chit chat tends to go on, and then, but sometimes we'll have members that might have an issue or sort of raise an issue, and there'll be discussion around that, so that, you know, they might be looking for assistance as to sort of say, you know, I have an issue as far as, I don't know, remembering his car keys. He said he always puts them in the same place, but they're never there or something. And so then discussion will develop around that, or especially sort of with new members, you know, sometimes I'll ask something, so say, oh, do any of you experience such and such? And we go, and everyone will go, yes, we all do. And they go, oh, good. So it's not just me that experiences that. And we go, no. You know, and we sort of find that with these support groups, it's really just sharing those experiences, and, you know, something that people sort of find, oh, they're not the only, you know, it's part of the disease. That you know, we may not all experience the same things, but you know, and it's also, you know, one of the things I found interesting was that we had a member from Perth who was actually a Kiwi but living in Perth, and she had three teenage daughters. And so she was always coming up with strategies that she had found that worked for her in doing certain things. And I can remember one was that she said, oh, whenever, because she was still being able to bake and cook, and she said, oh, one of the frustrating things was that she'd either forget to put something in, or she would put it in twice or three times. And so she said, so the strategy is I got all the ingredients out and put them all on the left-hand side. And then as I used them, then I put them through onto the right-hand side. And she said, so that way I was sort of more guaranteed that I'd only use it once. And I can remember sort of sharing this a couple of times at various talks I've done, and people in the audience who didn't have dementia, so I said, well, that's a great idea. I must remember to do that myself. So, yeah, so I mean, it is sort of sharing strategies around how to cope with certain things. And yeah, and if anything, it is, rather than, you know, I sort of wondered whether maybe we should change the name and just call it a social group rather than a peer-to-peer support group, because I think that sort of has connotations that it is a structured type event that we run.
Thank you.
There's also a support group, isn't there, Alistair, for people who live alone?
Yes.
Which I always thought was a wonderful idea. People can jump online and was there a Christmas, people jumped online on Christmas Day if they were going to be alone, or am I remembering that wrong?
There was one of our members in the UK offered to virtually be online for the day. And I think she was supported by someone in the States as well. And again, it was more because of the time zones. And so people could just dial in at any time during the day and join with others that may be there or may not be there. So, yeah, I'm not too sure how she actually managed it. I think she must have just dialed in and left the computer going, and if someone arrived, they'd call out and then she'd respond and get in front of the screen. So that still does continue.
Oh, good. Any of us could refer someone to DAI for those peer-to-peer groups?
Yep.
And would we just encourage them to email the inquiries email or info email?
Yeah, if they go onto the website, we've tried to make it a lot more easier for members to join DAI. Before, it was sort of it wasn't dementia friendly as far as to join the organisation. So hopefully we're still in the process of updating our website. Well, has been updated, but there's still some things that haven't quite been finalised. So,
Yeah.
yeah, as far as joining the organisation, hopefully we've now got that streamlined a lot better.
And if someone was new to using Zoom or something like that, could they have a family member with them that first time or at other times to support them?
Yes, yeah, most definitely. And I mean, with one of the support groups that I was involved in, often, you know, their spouse would actually help get them on, say hello to everyone, and so we've all got to know them quite well, and then they'd disappear off, and then sometimes if there was a bit of an issue, if they'd had enough or wanted to go, and then we'd just say to them, "Oh, call out to your wife and get her to come back again." So he'd call out to her and she'd come back and say, "Oh, what's the issue?" And we say, "Oh, he's had enough, he wants to go now." So she said, "Oh, good, right, goodbye everyone," and she'd log him out. And what we try and do is with any new members when they first apply is that we try and actually sort of make contact them one-on-one. So, and then try and actually even get to meet them via Zoom. So it's just a one-on-one, and then we can sort of talk through any issues they might have, or just make sure that they can use Zoom. Because you know, it is one of the daunting things is the first time you use it, is the camera going to work, is the microphone working? So yeah, I've done that with a number of members where I've just organised to have a one-on-one with them.
Alister, can I just ask, has the membership continued to sort of grow through the years, and what was...
Yes, it is. Yeah, it has continued to grow, and I must admit, probably in the last 6 months, there hasn't been much interest, but I think that's partly because we sort of pulled a lot of the services back until we sort of got ourselves organised as to what direction we were going to head in. So now that we're sort of, like I say, got members on the board, and we've got one person employed on a contract basis, and looking at having another one employed hopefully within the next few weeks. So that will enable us now to sort of get back to providing a number of the services that we actually had to drop.
And I was just really interested from the membership perspective, what is it that Dementia Alliance International is doing so well that really saw them not want dementia or the DAI to cease its operations? What's the best thing that comes out of the groups?
I think it's more because it is only people with dementia that are involved in the organisation. And if we go back to when it was first founded, initially there was a group formed that included care partners, and what ended up happening was that the care partners tended to dominate the discussion and sort of took it over. And because of that, that was really then those with dementia decided that they needed their own voice, and hence that was really sort of how Dementia Alliance International got established, that those with dementia decide, right, you know, they would be their own voice. And I think for people wanting to join, that is one of the main reasons, is that you know, they are talking to other people with dementia, and it's not with care partners that are going to possibly tend to dominate or try and take over.
Thanks, Alister, and thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions, comments? No.
Thank you, Alister. That was great. Really insightful and interesting to get your perspective and your sort of experience with the group. It's a really good insight.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming, particularly at the very last minute. So thank you for answering my email yesterday.
That's all right.
This session will be online by the end of the week, and I will send out a link to the email list, so that please feel free to pass it on to anyone in your networks, and also please feel free to pass on the invitation to this network to anyone who might be interested. It doesn't have to be in Victoria, it doesn't have to be someone who works at a funded organisation. Anyone with an interest in better outcomes for people living with dementia is more than welcome to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for coming along today.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. And thank you again, Alistair. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.